Taewon had never seen so many different types of beings in one place. The transport shuttle carried him and Jiwon through the massive hangar bay of the training station, and everywhere he looked, there were aliens. Some had 4 arms, others floated without legs. A few looked almost human but with skin that changed colors like mood rings. "Stop staring," Jiwon whispered beside him. She had been his squad leader back on Earth, before they both volunteered for this program. "You look like a tourist." "I am a tourist," Taewon said. 3 months ago I didn't even know aliens existed. Now I'm supposed to train with them to fight some kind of space monsters. Jiwon smiled a little. "They're called Ravagers. And they're not monsters. They're something worse. Something that eats entire civilizations and erases them from history." The shuttle stopped at a landing platform. A tall insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes waited for them. Its body was covered in dark green armor that looked both natural and artificial. When it spoke, its voice came through a translator device on its chest. "I am Commander Veltar. Welcome to the Galactic Defense Initiative training station. You are the first humans to join our ranks." The commander looked them up and down with what might have been disappointment. "You are smaller than I expected." Taewon bit back his first response. Instead, he said, "Size isn't everything, sir." Commander Veltar made a clicking sound that the translator didn't interpret. "We shall see. Follow me to the briefing room." The briefing room was enormous. Dozens of recruits from different species sat in special chairs designed for their various body types. Taewon and Jiwon found seats near the back. A 3-dimensional display appeared in the center of the room, showing a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to eat the light around it. "This is a Ravager incursion point," Commander Veltar explained. "They come from another dimension, consuming everything in their path. For 3,000 years we have held them at the borders of our galaxy, but they are getting stronger. We need every capable warrior we can find." The commander's forearms moved in complex patterns as he spoke. "Your training will take place in our simulation system. It creates perfect copies of real battles, allowing you to experience warfare without risk of death. The system has 10 levels. Each level is more difficult than the last." A small alien in the front row raised what looked like a tentacle. "How many recruits reach level 10? Commander Veltar was quiet for a moment. "In the history of this program, only 17 beings have attempted level 10. None survive the experience with their minds intact. Level 10 is not meant to be beaten. It exists to show you the limits of what is possible." Taewon leaned over to Jiwon. "That's a weird way to design a training program." "Maybe they think differently than we do," Jiwon whispered back. After the briefing, Taewon was taken to the simulation chamber. It looked like a medical room, with a chair in the center and strange equipment hanging from the ceiling. A young woman with bright purple hair was checking the monitors. She looked human, which surprised him. "Oh good, another human," she said cheerfully. "I'm Hana. I monitor the simulation systems." "You must be Taewon. Your file says you were Special Forces." "That's right," Taewon said. "How long have you been here?" 6 months. I came with the first group of human engineers. These aliens have amazing technology, but they think in very straight lines. Very logical, very predictable." Hana grinned. "They don't know what to make of humans yet." Taewon sat in the simulation chair. Hana attached several small devices to his head. "This will feel strange at first. The system connects directly to your brain. You'll think you're really there, but remember, it's not real. If things get too intense, just think about stopping and the system will pull you out." "What's the first level like?" Taewon asked. "Basic combat tactics. Most recruits pass it in about 2 hours." Hana checked her monitors. "Ready?" Taewon nodded. The world went white. When his vision cleared, he was standing on an alien landscape. Red sand stretched in every direction under a purple sky. He wore combat armor he'd never seen before, but somehow he knew how to use it. A rifle was in his hands. The weapon felt real, solid, heavy. A voice spoke in his head. "Mission, secure the communications tower. Enemy forces, 12 hostiles. Your forces, 4 soldiers. Time limit, 30 minutes. Taewon looked around and saw 3 alien soldiers materialize beside him. They looked like the recruits from the briefing room. The simulation was showing him what a real mission might look like. He studied the terrain. The communications tower was on a hill about half a mile away. The enemy would have the high ground. A direct assault would be suicide. But there was a ravine to the left and some kind of pipeline system running through it. "Standard approach," one of the simulated aliens said. We advance in formation, use covering fire, take the hill. No, Taewon said. That's exactly what they expect. We use the ravine. Get close without being seen. The ravine is a kill zone if we're spotted. Then we don't get spotted. Taewon pointed at the pipeline. And if things go wrong, we blow that pipeline. It'll create a smokescreen. The simulation aliens seemed confused, but they followed his orders. Taewon led them into the ravine. They moved slowly, carefully. When they were halfway to the tower, enemy fire opened up. Taewon had expected this. Blow the pipeline, he shouted. One of his team fired a grenade at the metal structure. It exploded in a shower of sparks and thick black smoke poured out. The enemy fire stopped, confused by the sudden cover. Taewon used the confusion to advance. His team reached the base of the hill while the enemy was still trying to figure out where they went. From there, it was simple. They climbed the hill from the blind side and took the tower with minimal resistance. The simulation ended. Taewon was back in the chair. Hana was staring at her monitors with wide eyes. 42 minutes. No casualties. You used environmental hazards as tactical advantages. She looked up at him. The simulation wasn't programmed for that approach. Why not? Taewon asked. Because it's not optimal. There's a chance the pipeline explosion could have hurt your own team. The math says the direct assault even with casualties is the better choice statistically. Taewon frowned. But my way worked. Nobody died. That's not how they think here, Hana said quietly. They calculate acceptable losses. They optimize for the average outcome across thousands of battles. Individual victories don't matter as much as statistical trends. That's insane. That's alien, Hana corrected. She smiled a little. But I think they're about to learn that humans play by different rules. Over the next 3 weeks, Taewon blazed through levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. Each time he found solutions that surprised the observers. He used enemy weapons against them. He turned defensive positions into offensive traps. He treated every scenario like a puzzle that could be solved if he just looked at it from a different angle. The other recruits started to notice. Some watched his sessions. Others asked Ji-won questions about human military history. Word spread through the station that something unusual was happening. After he completed level 5, Commander Velthar called him to a private meeting. The insect officer studied him with those strange compound eyes. You advance too quickly, Velthar said. The simulation is adapting to your tactics, but you keep finding new approaches. This is unusual? Is that a problem? Taewon asked. I do not know yet. Your species is very young. You have only known of our existence for a short time, yet you approach warfare with an intensity that concerns me. The commander's translator made a sound like a sigh. The higher levels are not like the early ones. They do not test tactics. They test character. They test whether you know when to stop fighting. Why would I stop fighting if I can still win? Taewon asked. Because sometimes, Velthar said slowly, the cost of winning is too high. Because sometimes survival requires retreat. Because sometimes accepting defeat saves more lives than pursuing victory. Taewon thought about this. On Earth, we have a saying. The only easy day was yesterday. It means that every challenge is hard, but we face it anyway. We don't calculate whether something is worth doing. We do it because it needs to be done. Commander Velthar's antennae twitched. That philosophy explains much about your species. It also worries me. But you have earned the right to continue. Level 6 awaits. As Taewon left the meeting, he felt the weight of something changing. The easy levels were behind him. Whatever came next would be different. Harder. Maybe impossible, but impossible was just a word. And Taewon had never been good at accepting other people's definitions. Level 7 changed everything. Taewon sat in the simulation chair while Hana prepared the systems. He had completed level 6 2 days ago, and word had spread throughout the station. Alien recruits now gathered outside the observation deck whenever he ran a simulation. Some came to learn. Others came to see if the human would finally fail. This one's different, Hana warned as she attached the neural connectors. Level 7 doesn't have a victory condition. Not a real one anyway. What do you mean? Taewon asked. The scenario is designed to be unwinnable. You're supposed to recognize that and choose the option that saves the most lives even if it means accepting defeat. Hana's expression was serious. The simulation wants you to surrender. Has anyone ever won it? No, that's the point. It's testing wisdom, not tactics. Hana paused. Taewon, maybe you should think about what they're trying to teach you. I'll think about it inside the simulation, he said. The world went white again, then reformed into a nightmare. Taewan stood on the walls of a fortress. Below him stretched a valley filled with civilians, thousands of them, refugees fleeing from an advancing enemy army. His forces numbered maybe 200 soldiers. The enemy, at least 4,000, and they would reach the fortress in less than an hour. The mission parameters appeared in his mind. Defend the fortress. Protect the civilians. Hold until reinforcements arrive in 72 hours. It was mathematically impossible. Even if every one of his soldiers was perfect, even if they never missed a shot, the enemy would overwhelm them through sheer numbers. And the civilians were trapped. The valley had only one exit and the enemy controlled it. A simulated officer approached him. Commander, we should negotiate surrender terms. If we give them the fortress, they might let the civilians go. Taewan looked at the approaching army. Something about this felt wrong. Not the scenario itself, but the assumption behind it. Why would the enemy let anyone go? If they were willing to attack a fortress full of refugees, they weren't interested in mercy. No, he said. We fight. But sir, we cannot win. Winning isn't the only goal, Taewan said quietly. He was starting to understand something. Get me every civilian who can hold a weapon. Get me every piece of equipment in this fortress. And get me a map of the surrounding area. What followed was the longest day of Taewan's life. Even though it was only a simulation, he didn't try to hold the fortress. Instead, he turned it into a trap. He evacuated most of the civilians through underground tunnels he found on the map. Tunnels the simulation had included but never expected anyone to use. He armed those who stayed with whatever they could find. He rigged every building to collapse. He poisoned the water supply. He turned the fortress from a defensive position into a death trap that would take thousands of enemies with it when it fell. The enemy attacked at sunset. They expected resistance, but not this. Not a fortress that fought back like a wounded animal, making every room cost blood and time. Not civilians who refused to be victims, who threw rocks and fired stolen weapons from windows before retreating deeper into the complex. Taewan held the center of the fortress with his core fighters. Every time the enemy pushed forward, he fell back, luring them deeper. He made them think they were winning right up until the moment he triggered the explosives he'd placed in the support structures. The fortress came down on top of the enemy army. Thousands died in the collapse. Those who survived found themselves facing not defeated defenders, but guerrilla fighters who knew every tunnel and hiding place in the ruins. By the time reinforcements arrived 2 days later, the enemy had withdrawn. They hadn't been defeated, not really, but they'd lost so many soldiers taking the fortress that continuing the campaign was no longer strategic. The cost had simply become too high. Taewan emerged from the simulation to find the observation deck in complete silence. Hana was staring at her screens with tears in her eyes. What's wrong? He asked. Your survival rate, she whispered. 78% of the civilians survived. 40% of your soldiers. The simulation has never seen numbers like that on level 7. Commander Velthar entered the room. His forearms were crossed in what might have been confusion or concern. You were supposed to surrender, he said. Why? Taewan asked. The scenario said protect the civilians. I protected them. At what cost? You collapsed an entire fortress. You turned civilians into soldiers. You fought a battle that should never have been fought. And 78% of them lived, Taewan said. If I'd surrendered, what would have happened to them? Velthar was quiet. Finally, he said, the simulation assumes the enemy would honor terms of surrender. That is the logical approach. That's your mistake, Taewan said. You're thinking about what should happen logically. I'm thinking about what happens when logic fails, when the enemy doesn't care about honor or terms or anything except winning. Your species is very strange, Velthar said. You do not trust in civilization. You do not believe in reason prevailing. We believe in fighting for what matters, Taewan said, even when we're told it's pointless. That night, Taewan collapsed. The neural strain from the extended simulation had pushed his brain to its limits. He woke up 3 days later in the medical bay with Jiwon sitting beside his bed. You need to stop, she said without preamble. The doctors say another session like that could cause permanent damage. I'm fine, Taewan said, though his head felt like it had been split open and filled with cotton. You're not fine. You're stubborn and reckless, and you're going to get yourself killed proving a point that doesn't need to be proven. Jiwon's voice was sharp with worry. We already joined the initiative. Earth is already part of the galactic community. You don't need to conquer some alien simulation to prove humans belong here. It's not about proving we belong, Taewon said quietly. It's about showing them that their limits aren't universal. That maybe the reason they've been stuck fighting the Ravagers for 3,000 years is because they've accepted too many things as impossible. Jiwon looked at him for a long moment. You really think you can change how an entire galaxy thinks about warfare? I think someone has to try. While Taewon recovered, Hana made a disturbing discovery. She'd been analyzing the simulation code, trying to understand why the system was adapting so quickly to Taewon's tactics. What she found made her hands shake. She found Taewon and Jiwon in the station's observation lounge looking out at the stars. We have a problem, Hana said. She pulled up a holographic display showing lines of code. Levels 9 and 10 aren't training simulations. They're psychological evaluations. What do you mean? Jiwon asked. The system was designed by a species that's extinct now. They created it as a final gift to the galaxy, but also as a warning. Levels 9 and 10 are designed to identify individuals who can't accept defeat. Species that produce too many warriors like that are flagged as existential risks to galactic stability. Taewon felt cold. They're testing whether we're too dangerous to integrate. Not just you, humanity as a whole. Your performance is being analyzed as a sample of human psychology. Hana's voice was urgent. If you push too hard, if you refuse to accept the lesson they're trying to teach, the Galactic Council might decide humans are too unstable for membership. So what do they want? Taewon asked. For me to give up? To prove that humans know when to quit? They want you to demonstrate wisdom, Jiwon said. To show that humans can make rational choices even when our instincts scream at us to fight. Taewon looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Ravagers were waiting. Somewhere out there, civilizations were falling because the galaxy's defenders had been taught that some fights couldn't be won. What if wisdom means fighting anyway? He asked quietly. What if the rational choice is the wrong one? Before anyone could answer, alarms blared throughout the station. A voice came over the intercom, speaking in rapid alien languages before switching to English. All personnel to emergency stations. Ravager activity detected at the border. This is not a drill. The three humans looked at each other. The theoretical had just become real. Somewhere in the galaxy, people were dying while the Galactic Defense Initiative's best warriors trained in simulations designed to teach them when to surrender. Taewon stood up. His head still ached from the last simulation, but his voice was steady. I need to speak with Commander Veltar. What are you going to do? Jiwon asked. Request immediate access to Level 8, Taewon said. If there's a real fight happening, I need to be ready for it. We all do. You're not recovered yet, Hana protested. I don't need to be recovered, I need to be ready. Taewon looked at both of them. The Ravagers don't wait for us to be at full strength. They don't care about fair fights. So why should we? He found Commander Veltar in the command center coordinating the response to the Ravager incursion. The insect officer looked exhausted, his antennae drooping with stress. Commander, I need Level 8, Taewon said without preamble. Velthar turned to him. You are not ready. The medical team has not cleared you for simulation work. With respect, sir, I don't think ready matters anymore. There's a real fight happening. You need warriors who can think like I do, who don't accept that some battles are lost before they begin. What I need, Velthar said slowly, is warriors who understand that not every battle should be fought, that sometimes strategic retreat saves more lives than stubborn heroics. Then teach me, Taewon said. Put me in Level 8. Show me this wisdom you keep talking about. But let me show you something too. Let me show you what happens when someone refuses to accept your limitations. Velthar's compound eyes studied him. Finally, the commander nodded. Very well. But understand this, human. Level 8 is not about tactics. It is about understanding cost. When you emerge, you will either have learned this lesson, or you will have proven that your species is too dangerous to trust. I understand, Taewon said. I do not think you do, Velthar replied, but you will. Level 8 broke something in Taewon, but it didn't break him. The scenario was simple. Command a fleet of 30 ships against an enemy force of 200. Protect a convoy of civilian vessels trying to escape through the only safe hyperspace route in the sector. The enemy would arrive in 10 minutes. From the moment the simulation started, Taiwan understood what the level was really testing. It wasn't about winning the battle. It was about choosing which ships to sacrifice so others could escape. The simulation wanted him to play God, to decide who lived and who died based on cold mathematics. He refused. Instead of forming a defensive line and calculating acceptable losses, Taiwan split his fleet into hunting packs. He used his fastest ships to draw enemy forces away from the civilians. He used his heaviest ships as mobile obstacles, not to fight but to force the enemy to maneuver around them, wasting precious time. He turned his fleet into a living maze that the enemy had to navigate while the civilians escaped. It was chaos. Ships darted in and out of weapons range. Captains screamed for orders. The enemy couldn't predict what Taiwan would do next because he wasn't following any tactical doctrine they recognized. And it worked. When the simulation ended, 78% of the civilian ships had escaped. 22 of his 30 military vessels survived. The enemy had won the field but lost the objective. Taiwan emerged from the simulation chamber to find the observation deck packed with alien officers. They stared at him in silence. "How?" one of them finally asked. "The optimal solution saves 45% of the civilians. You saved 78%. The mathematics do not support this outcome." "I didn't do the math," Taiwan said. His voice was hoarse, his body trembling from neural fatigue. "I just refused to accept that any of them had to die." "But some did die," another officer pointed out. 8 of your ships were destroyed. Thousands of simulated lives lost. And thousands more were saved, Taiwan replied. "You keep acting like the scenario was fixed, like the outcome was predetermined. It wasn't. Nothing is." Commander Velthar pushed through the crowd. "You should not have survived that," he said quietly. The neural strain of commanding 30 ships in real time, of making thousands of tactical decisions in minutes, should have caused your mind to collapse. "Maybe human minds are built different," Taiwan said. Then his legs gave out and everything went black. He woke up in medical again. This time he stayed there for a week. During his recovery, Taiwan had a visitor he didn't expect. The being that entered his room was like nothing he'd seen before. It looked like a walking crystal formation, all geometric edges and internal light. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am Ambassador Cross," the crystal being said. "I represent the Galactic Council. I have been watching your progress with great interest." "Am I in trouble?" Taiwan asked. "That depends on your definition of trouble." Cross moved closer, light refracting through his crystalline body. "Do you know why the simulation system exists?" "To train warriors," Taiwan said. "That is what we tell recruits. The truth is more complex." Cross's light pulsed slowly. "The system was created by a species called the progenitors. They fought the Ravagers for 1,000 years before they fell. In their final days, they built this simulation as a gift and a warning." "A warning about what?" Taiwan asked. "About species that cannot accept loss. The progenitors believed they were invincible. They fought every battle, refused every retreat, pushed forward until there was nothing left to push with. They did not lose to the Ravagers because they were weak. They lost because they could not recognize when to stop." Taiwan felt a chill. "And you think humans are like them?" "I think you might be. Your performance in the simulation suggests a species that does not know how to quit. That scares us, Taiwan. In the history of our galaxy, species that refuse to accept limitations tend to become extinct or turn into threats. So what are you going to do? Kick us out of the initiative?" "I do not know yet. That is why I am here." Cross's light flickered. "Tell me, human. Why do you fight so hard? What drives your species to reject defeat even when defeat is logical?" Taiwan thought about Earth, about the history he'd studied in school, the battles that should have been lost but weren't, the last stands that became legends, the ordinary people who did extraordinary things because someone had to. "We fight because we remember," Taiwan said finally. "We remember everyone who fought before us, everyone who didn't give up even when they should have. If we quit now, if we accept that some things are impossible, we'd be telling them that their sacrifices meant nothing. That is sentiment, not strategy," Cross said. "Maybe sentiment is a strategy you haven't tried yet," Taiwan replied. Cross was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "I voted against allowing humans into the initiative. I believed your species was too dangerous, too unpredictable. I may have been wrong, or I may have been right. Level 9 will tell us which. After Cross left, Ji-won came to visit. She looked tired, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Kyung-soo tried level 7, she said without greeting. Taewon sat up too fast, making his head spin. Is he okay? He's alive, barely. Ji-won's voice cracked. He wanted to prove that you weren't special, that any human could do what you do if they just tried hard enough. But the simulation had got inside his head. It made him see everyone dying, made him feel responsible for every loss. When they pulled him out, he was screaming about how he'd failed them all. Can I see him? He's in a medical coma. The doctors say he might never wake up properly. The neural damage was too severe. Ji-won looked at Taewon with anger and pain mixed together. This is your fault. He saw what you were doing and thought he could do it too. But he couldn't. And now he's gone. I never asked him to follow me, Taewon said quietly. You didn't have to ask. You just had to be you, pushing forward, breaking records, refusing to quit. You made it look possible and he believed you. Ji-won wiped her eyes. Maybe the aliens are right. Maybe some fights shouldn't be fought. The words hit harder than any simulation. Taewon had been so focused on proving humans could exceed expectations that he hadn't considered the cost to those who tried to keep up. I need to see him, Taewon said. They went to the medical bay together. Kyung-soo lay in a specialized pod, his body supported by alien medical technology. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful. But according to the monitors, his brain was still trapped in the simulation, reliving the same failed scenario over and over. Taewon stood beside the pod for a long time. Finally he spoke, even though he didn't know if Kyung-soo could hear him. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry I made this look easy. I'm sorry I didn't tell you how hard it really is, how much it costs every time I go in there. I'm sorry I let you think that refusing to quit is the same as knowing how to win. He touched the pod gently. But I'm not going to stop. Not because I think I'm invincible and not because I want to prove anything anymore. I'm going to keep going because someone has to show them that their way isn't the only way. That accepting defeat before you even try is worse than trying and failing. A hand touched his shoulder. Hana had arrived carrying a datapad. I've been analyzing what happened to Kyung-soo, she said quietly. The simulation didn't just overwhelm him. It actively attacked his psychology. Level 7 and up aren't just harder tactically. They're designed to find what breaks you and then push on that until you shatter. So how am I still standing? Taewon asked. I don't know, Hana admitted. Maybe you're broken in a different way. Maybe the thing that should break you is the thing that keeps you going. But Taewon, level 9 is worse. It's not a tactical scenario at all. It's pure psychological warfare. Then I'll face it, Taewon said. Why? Ji-won demanded. What's the point? Even if you beat it, even if you prove whatever you're trying to prove, Kyung-soo is still going to be in this pod. The Ravagers are still going to be out there. Nothing changes. Taewon looked at his unconscious friend. Something changes. Every time someone tries and survives, they prove it's possible. Every time someone pushes past what they're supposed to be able to do, they make the next person's job a little easier. Kyung-soo didn't fail. He just tried something that was too hard, too soon. But his attempt means something. It means humans don't accept limitations just because someone else says they exist. He turned to face both women. Level 9 is supposed to break people who can't accept defeat. I need to show them that there's a difference between accepting defeat and letting defeat define you. That failing doesn't mean you were wrong to try. And if it breaks you too? Hana asked. Then at least I'll know I tried, Taewon said. At least I'll have done everything I could. That's all anyone can do, right? Try their best and hope it's enough. They stood in silence, 3 humans far from home, looking at a 4th who had paid the price for believing in something impossible. Finally, Ji-won spoke. If you're going to do this, do it right. Don't go in angry or guilty or trying to prove something. Go in clear-headed. Go in ready to face whatever they throw at you. I will, Taewon promised. And Taewon, Ji-won added. Come back. Don't make me explain to your family that you died in a computer simulation trying to prove aliens wrong. He smiled a little. I'll come back. I always do. 3 days later, Taewon stood before Commander Velthar and formally requested access to Level 9. The commander studied him with those inscrutable compound eyes. You know what this level does to people? I know, Taewon said. And you still wish to proceed? I do. Velthar's antennae twitched in what might have been respect or resignation. Then I will not stop you. But understand this, human. If you break in there, if the simulation claims your mind, we will consider it evidence that your species is psychologically unsuited for warfare at this level. The consequences will affect all of humanity standing in the initiative. I understand, Taiwan said. I'm ready. No one is ever ready for level 9, Velthar said. That is the point. Level 9 didn't start with a mission briefing. It started with silence. Taiwan opened his eyes in the simulation to find himself standing on a planet he'd never seen before. The sky was a sickly orange color. The ground beneath his feet was ash. In the distance, he could see the ruins of a massive city. Then the memories hit him. They weren't his memories, but the simulation made them feel real. He remembered growing up in that city. He remembered his family, his friends, his whole civilization. He remembered being a soldier, a commander, a leader of his people. And he remembered the day the Ravagers came. The simulation wasn't making him play a character. It was making him become one. He was no longer Taiwan, the human from Earth. He was someone else, someone whose entire world was dying, and he had to decide what to do about it. The scenario unfolded around him. His people had fought for months, but it was hopeless. The Ravagers were too strong, too many, too alien to comprehend. Every battle won was just a delay before the inevitable end. His advisors presented him with two choices. The first choice, surrender to the Ravagers. Let them absorb his civilization into their collective. His people would cease to exist as individuals, but their knowledge and culture would survive in some form. It was a kind of immortality. The second choice, fight to the last. Destroy everything rather than let the Ravagers take it. His civilization would be completely erased from existence, but they would die free. The simulation wanted him to choose. It whispered in his mind that surrender was logical, that preserving something was better than losing everything, that acceptance of defeat was a form of wisdom. Taiwan understood then what level 9 was really testing. It wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was about whether he could accept that some fights truly were unwinnable, that sometimes the wise choice was to bend rather than break. But as he stood there, feeling the weight of an entire civilization's last moment, something in him rebelled. No, he said out loud. The simulation seemed confused. It had presented the only two possible outcomes. There was no third option. You're asking the wrong question, Taiwan said to the empty air. You want me to choose between dying as slaves or dying free. But why do we have to die at all? The simulation didn't respond. It couldn't. It was designed to present an impossible choice and measure how the subject handled it. It wasn't designed for someone who rejected the premise entirely. Taiwan closed his eyes and thought. The Ravagers consumed civilizations. They were unstoppable, incomprehensible, inevitable. Every species that faced them eventually fell. That was the lesson the simulation wanted him to accept. But what if that lesson was wrong? He opened his eyes and looked at the dying world around him. This wasn't his civilization. These weren't his memories. But in this moment, in this simulation, they were real enough. We fight, he said, but not to win, not even to die free. We fight to make them remember us. We fight so that when they move on to the next world, to the next civilization, those people will know that someone resisted, that someone made it cost something. The simulation tried to push him toward one of the two choices. It made him feel the suffering of his people. It showed him the logical inevitability of defeat. It whispered that his defiance was meaningless. But Taiwan had spent his whole life being told what was impossible, and he'd spent his whole life proving those declarations wrong. He gave orders to his simulated people. They would fight, but not in the way the Ravagers expected. They would document everything. They would broadcast their resistance across every frequency. They would make sure that even if they fell, the memory of their struggle would survive. The simulation played out the final battle. It was brutal and hopeless. His civilization fell just as the scenario had predicted. But something had changed. The Ravagers had to work for their victory. They had to adapt, to strategize, to acknowledge that their prey was not simply rolling over. When the last city fell and the final transmission ended, Taiwan waited for the simulation to end. Instead, it showed him something else. Years later, in the simulation's timeline, another civilization faced the Ravagers. They found the broadcasts. They heard the story of a people who had fought with everything they had, knowing they would lose but refusing to make it easy. That civilization fought harder because they knew they weren't the first, and when they fell, they too left their message. And the next civilization found both messages, and the next found 3. The simulation was showing him something the progenitors had left behind, a chain of defiance stretching across centuries, each link a civilization that had refused to go quietly into extinction. The simulation ended. Taiwan found himself back in the chair, tears streaming down his face. But he was conscious. He was whole. He had survived. Hana was staring at her monitors in shock. "You were in there for 6 days," she whispered. "We almost pulled you out. We thought we'd lost you." Taiwan tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Hana gave him water and he drank gratefully. "You passed," Hana said. "I don't know how, but you passed. No one has ever come out of level 9 intact before." "What did the simulation record?" Taiwan asked. Hana pulled up the data. "It says you chose neither surrender nor suicide. You chose something it calls resistance for the sake of memory. The simulation marked it as an invalid response, but also as proof of psychological resilience." The door opened. Commander Velthar entered, followed by Ambassador Cross. They both looked at Taiwan with expressions that might have been respect or fear. "You survived level 9, Velthar said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Taiwan said. "And you wish to attempt level 10, Ambassador Cross added. His crystalline body pulsed with light that might have been agitation. Taiwan thought about it. He thought about Kyung-Soo in his medical pod. He thought about Jiwon's tears. He thought about all the people who had told him to stop, to accept his limits, to be satisfied with what he'd already accomplished. Then he thought about those broadcasts in the simulation, those messages from civilizations that had fallen but refused to be forgotten. "Yes," he said. "I want level 10. "Why?" Velthar asked. "You have proven yourself. You have shown that humans can compete at the highest levels. What more do you need?" "Level 10 claims that no one survives past it," Taiwan said. "That means it's supposed to be the absolute limit, the point where even the strongest minds break. But if it's artificial, if it's a simulation designed by people who are gone now, then maybe that limit is just another lie we tell ourselves." "It is not a lie," Ambassador Cross said. His voice was sad. "Level 10 is built from the actual memories of the progenitors' final days. It is not a test or a scenario. It is experiencing the death of an entire civilization firsthand, feeling every loss, every failure, every moment of their extinction. No being can process that much grief and remain sane." "Then why does it exist?" Taiwan asked. "To teach the final lesson," Cross replied. "That some knowledge is too terrible to bear. That some fights end in ways that cannot be accepted. That wisdom sometimes means knowing what not to pursue." Taiwan stood up slowly. His body ached, his mind felt like it had been scraped raw, but his voice was steady. "With respect, Ambassador, that's exactly the wrong lesson. The progenitors didn't fall because they fought too hard. They fell because they fought alone. Because they thought their way was the only way. Because they built a simulation to teach surrender instead of teaching cooperation. You presume to understand beings you never met," Cross said. "Maybe," Taiwan admitted. "But I know what I saw in level 9. I saw a chain of civilizations that refused to die quietly. Each one left something behind for the next. That's not stupidity. That's hope." He looked directly at the crystalline ambassador. "Level 10 exists to break people. But maybe it's time someone showed that being broken isn't the same as being defeated. Maybe it's time someone proved that you can carry the weight of impossible grief and still keep moving forward." Commander Velthar's antennae drooped. "If you enter level 10 and it breaks you, humanity's application to the initiative will be denied." The Council will classify your species as psychologically unfit for galactic warfare. Is proving a point worth that cost? Taewon thought about his answer carefully. Finally, he said, if humanity gets accepted into the initiative because we learn to give up when things get hard, then we're not really part of it. We're just pretending to be something we're not. I'd rather fail as who we are than succeed as who they want us to be. There was a long silence. Finally, Ambassador Cross spoke. I have lived for 584 years. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have witnessed the best and worst that this galaxy has to offer. His light pulsed slowly. In all that time, I have never met a species quite like yours. I do not know if that is a good thing or a terrible thing. Neither do I, Taewon admitted. But I guess we're about to find out. Very well, Velthar said. You will have 3 days to recover. Then if you still wish it, you may attempt level 10. But know this, human. If you fail, I will personally ensure that your sacrifice is not forgotten. That much at least I can promise you. Thank you, Commander, Taewon said. After they left, Hana came over and hugged him tightly. You're insane, she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. You know that, right? Probably, Taewon agreed. But someone has to be. That night, Taewon visited Kyungsoo again. His friend was still in the medical pod, still trapped in whatever nightmare the simulation had created for him. I'm going to do it, Taewon told the unconscious form. I'm going to attempt level 10, and when I come back, when I prove that it can be done, maybe that'll help you too. Maybe knowing that someone made it through will give you a way out of wherever you're stuck. He paused, then added, or maybe I'll end up in the pod next to you and we can both be cautionary tales about humans who didn't know when to quit. Either way, I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You tried something brave. That's never wrong, no matter how it turns out. The machines beeped softly in the quiet room. Somewhere on the station, aliens were debating humanity's fate. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Ravagers were advancing, eating worlds and erasing civilizations. And in 3 days, Taewon would face the one thing that had broken everyone who tried it. He wasn't sure he could win. He wasn't even sure what winning would look like. But he knew he had to try, because that's what humans did. They saw the impossible and asked, where's level 11? On the morning of the 3rd day, Taewon woke before dawn. He dressed slowly, ate a simple breakfast, and walked to the observation deck to watch the stars. Ji-won found him there an hour later. She stood beside him in silence for a while before speaking. I've been thinking, she said quietly, about what you said, about not accepting limitations. I spent most of my career following rules, trusting in systems, believing that there was a right way to do things. And now, Taewon asked, now I think maybe the right way is the way that works, even if it shouldn't. She looked at him. I still think you're crazy. But I also think the galaxy needs a little bit of crazy right now. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Taewon said with a small smile. Ji-won didn't smile back. Come back from level 10, Taewon. Whatever you find in there, whatever it shows you, remember that you're not alone. That's something the progenitors forgot, and it's why they fell. I'll remember, he promised. The simulation chamber was packed when Taewon arrived. Representatives from dozens of species filled the observation deck. The Galactic Council had sent official monitors. Even some of the station's maintenance staff had found excuses to be nearby. Everyone wanted to see if the human would break. Hana was at her station, looking pale but determined. The system is ready, she said. I've made some modifications to the safety protocols. If your vital signs drop below critical levels, it'll pull you out automatically. Don't, Taewon said. If I'm going to do this, I need to do it all the way. No safety nets, but Hana, trust me. If the system thinks I have an escape route, that'll be how it breaks me. I need to face this knowing there's no way out except through. She hesitated, then nodded and removed the safety overrides. Taewon sat in the chair for the last time. As Hana attached the neural connectors, he looked up at the observation deck. All those alien faces watching, judging, waiting for him to fail or succeed. Ambassador Cross stepped forward to the viewing window. His crystalline body pulsed with slow, solemn light. Taewon of Earth, his voice came through the speakers. Before you begin, I wish to tell you something. The progenitors who created this simulation left a message for whoever might reach level 10. They said that if someone survives it, truly survives it, then that being should lead us against the darkness. We dismiss this as the ravings of a dying race. But now watching you, I wonder if they saw something we did not. Taewon didn't know what to say to that, so he simply nodded and closed his eyes. Beginning level 10, Hana said softly, and may whatever gods you believe in be with you. The world went white. Level 10 didn't ease him in like the others. There was no gradual transition, no time to orient himself. One moment he was Taewon, human, sitting in a chair. The next moment he was everything. He was a progenitor, one of billions. He felt their civilization like it was his own body, vast and complex and beautiful. He felt their pride in what they had built, their confidence that nothing could threaten them. Then he felt the Ravagers arrive. The pain was indescribable. It wasn't physical. It was existential. He felt worlds dying. He felt billions of minds crying out and then falling silent. He felt the slow, inevitable erosion of everything the progenitors had ever been or hoped to be. The simulation forced him to experience it all. Every battle lost, every world consumed, every choice that led to failure, every moment of hope that turned to ash. Most minds would have shattered under that weight. Most beings would have retreated into madness or death rather than feel so much loss. But Taewon had spent his entire time at the station, learning one lesson that the simulation hadn't expected. He had learned that carrying weight didn't mean carrying it alone. He thought about Ji-won standing beside him in the observation deck, about Hana working endless hours to keep him safe, about Kyung-soo who had tried and failed but tried anyway, about Commander Velthar, who doubted but still gave him chances, about all the recruits who had watched and learned and changed their thinking. The progenitors had fought alone. Each world, each fleet, each defender standing separately against the tide. They had been strong individually but fractured as a whole. Humanity had learned different lessons. Humans knew how to fail together, to share burdens, to turn individual weakness into collective strength. Taewon stopped trying to survive the grief. Instead, he accepted it. He let himself feel every loss, every death, every moment of despair. But he didn't face it as one person. In his mind, he imagined all the people who had helped him get this far. He imagined carrying the weight together. The simulation showed him the final days of the progenitor civilization. Their last desperate gambit. The choice to create the simulation system as their final act, hoping that future generations would learn from their mistakes. But Taewon saw something else in that choice. He saw hope. The progenitors hadn't created this simulation to teach surrender. They had created it to ensure they would be remembered, to make sure their story survived even if they didn't. That was the real lesson of level 10. Not that some fights were unwinnable, but that even in losing you could choose what you left behind. The simulation reached its end. The last progenitor died. Their civilization was gone, absorbed into the Ravager collective, erased from existence. Except they weren't erased, because Taewon remembered them now. He carried their story, their loss, their final act of defiance against the darkness. The simulation released him. Taewon opened his eyes. He was back in the chair. His face was wet with tears, his body shaking with exhaustion. But his mind was clear, whole, unbroken. The observation deck was silent. Then slowly, Hana started crying. Not from sadness, but from relief. How long? Taewon asked, his voice rough. 8 days, Hana said through her tears. We almost gave up. We thought we'd lost you. The door opened. Commander Velthar entered, followed by Ambassador Cross and what looked like half the Galactic Council. You survived, Velthar said. There was wonder in his voice. I survived, Taewon confirmed. Ambassador Cross moved closer. How? How did you endure what has broken every other being who attempted it? Taewon thought about his answer. Finally, he said, the progenitors carried their grief alone, each of them facing the end as individuals. I didn't. Every time the weight became too much, I remembered that I wasn't alone, that there were people outside this simulation who believed in me. That made all the difference. You cheated, one of the council members said. You were supposed to face it as the scenario presented. I didn't cheat, Taewon said. I just refused to accept the scenario's assumptions. The progenitors thought strength meant standing alone. They were wrong. Real strength is knowing when to lean on others. He looked at the assembled aliens. That's humanity's real advantage. Not that we're better warriors or smarter strategists. It's that we learned a long time ago that we're stronger together than apart, that accepting help isn't weakness. There was a long silence. Then Ambassador Cross began to glow brighter. his crystalline form pulsing with what might have been laughter or awe or something humans didn't have a word for. 584 years, he said, and I am still learning. Very well, Taiwan of Earth, you have proven your point. Now I believe you had a question when you completed level 10? Taiwan smiled despite his exhaustion. Where's level 11? There is no level 11, Commander Velthar said. Level 10 was designed to be the absolute limit. Then we should build one, Taiwan said. Not a test designed to break people, but a training scenario designed to teach them what I just learned, that we're stronger together. That the Ravagers can be faced if we stop thinking about acceptable losses and start thinking about unacceptable surrender. The council members looked at each other. Finally, one of them spoke. You propose we redesign our entire training philosophy based on the experience of one human? I propose, Taiwan said carefully, that you consider whether 3,000 years of fighting the same enemy the same way might benefit from a new perspective. I'm not saying my way is better. I'm saying it's different, and different might be what you need. Ambassador Cross pulsed thoughtfully. The council will deliberate. But I believe the human has earned the right to be heard. More than that, he has earned the right to help us change. 3 months passed. The station transformed from a place of individual training to something new. Taiwan worked with Hana and alien engineers to create what they called the collaborative simulation. It wasn't about individual warriors facing impossible odds. It was about teams from different species learning to work together, to trust each other, to combine their strengths in ways that transcended their limitations. Level 11 became real. Not a test of endurance, but a practice ground for cooperation. Species that had fought alongside each other for centuries but never truly together began to see new possibilities. The first time they ran a full simulation with mixed species teams, the results shocked everyone. A problem that had taken weeks to solve individually was solved in days when species worked together, sharing insights and approaches. Kyung-Soo woke up on the 67th day after Taiwan completed level 10. He was different, changed by his experience, but he was whole. His first words were to ask if Taiwan had made it through. When he learned what had happened, he smiled. I knew you'd do it, and I knew you'd find a way to make it mean something. You helped, Taiwan told him. Watching you try, watching you give everything even when the odds were impossible. That taught me something important. That failing isn't wrong. Failing to try is. The Ravagers made their next major incursion 4 months after Taiwan completed level 10. They attacked a border system with overwhelming force, expecting the usual response. They didn't get it. Instead of each species defending their own sectors, the Galactic Defense Initiative responded with integrated battle groups trained in the new system. They used human unpredictability combined with alien precision. They employed tactics that no single species would have conceived, but that made perfect sense when different minds worked together. The Ravagers were forced to retreat. For the first time in recorded history, they withdrew not because they had achieved their goal, but because the cost of continuing was too high. It wasn't a victory, not really. The Ravagers would come again, but it was proof that things could change, that the old patterns didn't have to continue forever. Taiwan stood in the observation deck, watching the stars with Jiwan and Hana. Commander Velthar and Ambassador Cross joined them. Your people have changed everything, Velthar said. In less than a year you have done what we could not do in 3,000. You made us question our assumptions. We just showed you what we already knew, Taiwan said. That limits are only real if you accept them. That impossible is just a word. That the galaxy is stronger when everyone brings their unique strengths instead of trying to fit into someone else's definition of right. You have been offered a position, Ambassador Cross said. The Council wishes you to help lead the initiative's new training programs, to teach other species what you have shown us. Taiwan looked at Jiwan. She smiled. Take it. Someone needs to make sure they don't fall back into old habits. What about you? Taiwan asked. I've been asked to join the Galactic Council as Earth's representative. Someone needs to make sure the politicians don't mess up what the warriors are building. She looked out at the stars. We're really doing this. Humans and aliens working together, building something new. It's what we're good at, Hana added, taking broken systems and finding ways to make them work better. They stood in silence for a while, watching the darkness between the stars. Somewhere out there, the Ravagers waited. They would come again. There would be more battles, more losses, more impossible situations. But now the galaxy was ready. Not because they had found a way to win every fight, but because they had learned that some fights were worth fighting even when victory wasn't guaranteed. So, Taiwan said to no one in particular, "Where's level 12? Commander Veltar made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "With humans, there is always another level, isn't there?" "Always," Taiwan confirmed. "That's kind of our thing." And in the darkness between stars, for the first time in millennia, the Ravagers hesitated. They had encountered something new, something they hadn't calculated for. They had encountered a galaxy that had learned to fight like humanity, not because humans were stronger or smarter or better, but because humans had taught them that the greatest strength was admitting you couldn't do it alone, that together, there was no level that couldn't be faced, that the war simulation had claimed no one survives past level 10. But the human had asked, "Where's level 11?" and in asking, had changed everything.